All right, there we go. Tonight, in part, 3 of a 4-part series where we check in with these teams prior to spring practices beginning. We're covering Oklahoma, Tennessee, Florida, and Ole Miss. We'll do all of that right after the stinger. Felix Sharpe here, Matthew Bruening there for CampusToCanton.com. I think we're going to call the show Campus to Canton Live tonight. I think that's what we're going to go away from Debbie Debate to Campus to Canton Live, so just deal with it. Just deal with it. We're covering OU, Tennessee, Florida, and Ole Miss. Of course, as always, like the video and subscribe to the channel. We're trying to get to 4,000 subscribers before the NFL draft. You all were great getting us to 3,000 in a really relatively short period of time. I don't see why we can't get to 4,000 subscribers here and help our format of fantasy football that includes college football to help that format grow. Before we get into the content tonight, I do want to note Nicholas Ian Allen's Good Morning Football. He started a live show in the morning, all on his own, so give that a look. He'll be live tomorrow at 10 a.m. Check that out and check out all of this week's shows. Nicholas Ian Allen is absolutely doing it on the YouTube page. Now, we are endeavoring to take calls on these live shows. Yeah. But our intern, JJ, is holding it up. This is his project. We need to get him going on here. So I want y'all to tweet at JJ, at JParker1738 on Twitter and tell him, let's go. Let's get it done so we can take calls into the show. All right, Matthew. I think this is a good one because all of these teams are exciting in their own right. At least they will be in 2024. Let's start with Oklahoma here. Of course, Coach Brett Venables is still there, but Jeff Lebby is off to Mississippi State. They bring in offensive coordinator Seth Luttrell, who was the head coach for 7 years at North Texas. If you remember Jalen Darden a few years ago at North Texas, kind of running through secondaries. He was actually probably a wide receiver 1. Seth Luttrell was his head coach. Jalen Darden now, of course, with the Bucs. He was an offensive analyst with the team last year, and we've seen some other coaching trees kind of take this path. Steve Sarkisian was the offensive analyst for Alabama before taking over for Lane Kiffin in, 2016 or something like that. Luttrell is a former player at OU. His dad played at OU, so this is a legacy hire here, and he coached under both Mike Leach and Sonny Dykes. So I would expect that we're going to have, a spread system, maybe not the RPO heavy system under Jeff Lebby, but we are going to be passing the ball a lot, or at least I would expect to under Luttrell. He has also coached Nick Foles, Nate Sudfeld, Rob Gronkowski at Arizona, and Mitch Trubisky. So a little bit of a track record there. He is going to be the play caller, but he is co-offensive coordinator with Joe John Finley, who is the co-offensive coordinator and tight ends coach. They lose Drake Stoops and Austin Stogner to the NFL draft. And this is a team that lost, some offensive production to the transfer portal. Of course, Dylan Gabriel, Tawi Walker to Wisconsin, one of my kind of favorite under-the-radar backs. Marcus Major, who felt like an institution at OU. He's gone. Dylan Smothers is gone. Davis Belleville, who we kind of remember, 2 years ago having that terrible game at the end of the season when all the quarterbacks were hurt there for Oklahoma. They do add Deion Burks from Purdue, Belleville, Michigan, stand up. Jake Roberts, a tight end from Baylor. Casey Thompson, a journeyman quarterback now for depth. This is a team that's offensive returning production is 46% or 109 in the country. Matt, I think the question for OU is going to be, can Jaxson Arnold mesh with Seth Luttrell? Can Seth Luttrell get the ceiling that we expect out of Jaxson Arnold?
I mean, I think so. You mentioned what he was able to do with Jalen Darden. If you just go look at his offenses over the past couple of years, again, North Texas, so, take that with a little bit of a grain of salt. They're not obviously playing the competition that Oklahoma will be playing heading into the SEC, but you're talking about, you said, hopefully passing the ball. Out of his, his 6 years being the head coach. I'm sorry, 7 years of being a head coach at North Texas. Only 2 of those were underneath the average line when it comes to passing the ball in a neutral rate situation of over 50%. Had a very good success rate as well, over 45% most of those years, except for those 2 as well. His wide receiver ones, you mentioned Jalen Darden, and the year that he had, most of his wide receivers average anywhere of 20 points or more. The Jalen Darden year, 30 points a game. So I imagine you are right. He was likely a wide receiver 1. That was the year that he went off. So, I mean, this offense, I think, is going to be high flying. It's going to be a lot of fun. I have some questions about the wide receiver core, but I think overall for Jaxson Arnold, he should absolutely thrive, I think, in this offense. I think they will have a good running game. Overall, some decent wide receivers, and what he can do throwing the ball, and obviously with his legs as well, I think will bring a new dynamic to Seth Michel's offense.
I really like Deion Burks. He seemed really explosive at Purdue at times. Now, Hudson Card wasn't able to get him the ball as consistently as maybe they can at Oklahoma, but there were times where, I mean, he was just a tough tackle, was even getting a lot of yards after the catch. I like Deion Burks. I like this landing spot. I think my question as far as the offense goes is, one of the things I really liked about Jaxson Arnold was his ability to run the ball. Not like Lamar Jackson, but kind of like Matt Corral. That's Matt Corral with less arm strength was what Jaxson Arnold reminded me of coming out of high school, coming out of Denton, Texas. I think so. I'm wondering if they will let him run the ball under this offense. I think that he should absolutely be a part of the running game in the read option, there with Javonte Barnes and Gavin Sawchuk in the backfield. We should be giving carries to Jaxson Arnold and not just having him run, scramble drills or unscripted plays. So that's kind of something that I would be watching for. It's not something we're going to expect to see in the spring game this year, of course, because quarterbacks don't run in the spring game. But I would be paying attention to how often he is used as a running threat when the season starts in September. Speaking of the running game, Matthew, I mean, your boy Gavin Sawchuk, he would seem to be the top dog going into 2024. Or do you think it's him, or is it going to be some sort of committee, or is it the speedster Gavin Sawchuk?
I mean, I think he's going to get first crack at it. We'll see if he ends up keeping that job. I think he has a chance to. I think he's also a very good receiving back as well, so he should thrive in that part of the game if they want to use him that way. The other running backs on the roster, obviously Javonte Barnes is still there. He had, in essence, kind of beaten out Sawchuk as a freshman, but has just really seemed to take a step back. I don't know how much of that is due to that dead bone issue that he had in his foot. He just didn't seem like the same player last year, and Sawchuk was kind of able to take over on that. They are bringing in a true freshman, Taylor Tatum, who we are pretty excited about here. We think he's going to be really good. I don't know that he eats into Sawchuk's workload at all either, so I really think he has a chance to really kind of take over. And the big thing I guess I worry about with that is we talked about how often they do pass the ball. His running backs, at least in his system that he's had at North Texas for those 7 years, they were only averaging about 12 points a game. He has a couple years in there, but it was early 2016, 2017, 2018 that those running backs were averaging almost 20 points a game. So I think a lot of that, Gavin Sawchuk's value, I think, is going to come from the receiving game if he is used in that.
Well, he only had 18 receptions last year for less than 100 yards, if I'm reading. Yeah. I'm sorry, 18 targets, 14 receptions for 94 yards. But I didn't realize this, but he had 744 yards on the ground on 120 carries, averaging over 6 yards per attempt. I mean, so been your boy. He's an explosive player. Javonte Barnes, who kind of had a better freshman season than sophomore season, he had 140 yards rushing on 37 attempts last year. I mean, Tawi Walker really and Marcus Major kind of really filled the gap there in Javonte Barnes' second year. But I would expect Barnes to be more heavily involved this year. I do want to note, excuse me, that last year they brought in two freshman running backs, both of whom I liked, in Caleb Hicks and Dylan Smothers. Caleb Hicks is there. Dylan Smothers who's left? Who's the one that left? Smothers left. Hicks is still there. I like both of them. So I would keep an eye out on both of them. I don't know if I'm rostering either up, right now. So, all right. You want to talk about Taylor Tatum, the freshman, the 4-star freshman running back here, that was 18th overall according to our recruiting rankings?
Yeah, he is a explosive back that I think could come in there, and I think he brings a little bit of a different dynamic, obviously, than Gavin Sawchuk. I wasn't that high on Hicks, so I don't know that he'll be a guy that I think will seed into that value. I do think Taylor Tatum comes in and really has a chance to go in there and play. I actually don't think I have him graded. I was going to look at where I have him. I actually don't have him graded currently, but you said we have him as 18. I know he's higher than that. He's got to be higher than that in the services. So maybe someone. I'm actually going to look right now. I'm going to find out who on our team doesn't like him, so I can.
It's also a weak running back class, but
it is.
The offensive freshmen to pay attention to in this OU class are Tatum, the 4-star running back from Longview, Texas, Zion Kearney, a 4-star wide receiver from Missouri, Texas, and Ivan Carrion, a 4-star wide receiver from Odessa, Texas. I think that's where Roy Williams, the former Cowboys and Lions wide receiver, is from Odessa. So, was there anything else you wanted to add on the freshman class?
No, I was trying to get this to pull up so I can see. Oh, it's everybody. No, there we go. Of course, it's Mike Valerie, who is tanking his grade a little bit. Everybody else has him as a tier 2 running back. We have him clocked at 21.6 miles per hour, an 0.848 athleticism score, which is really good. Like I said, I think he's going to be a very good running back for them. I think he could be the guy. I think he brings physicalness. I don't think I said that earlier. He's a very physical runner as well. That I think he brings in, which Sawchuk is not really. So I think he could bring that kind of what we saw out of Marcus Major and Tawi Walker last year for them. I think he could do that because I don't know that Hicks does that. Again, I was not very high on Cleve Hicks, so I could be wrong on him, but he was a three sport athlete as well. Played baseball and ran track and field in high school along with playing football.
I want to go back to Sawchuk here because you interviewed him like his senior year in high school going into college. Do you think that he's an NFL player, or is this just a potential very good, because he's a sub 200-pound back? So are we talking about Bucky Irving here, or Theo Riddick, or is he a guy that's just not going to be an NFL player?
I think he is going to be, but I don't view him as like a RB. Like, I think at best you're probably looking low-end RB2 because of how good of a receiver he is. I mean, you throw this name out there, and I don't want people to think this is who I'm comparing him to. I'm not, but he works with Christian McCaffrey in the offseason to become a better route runner and a receiver. You could argue Christian McCaffrey is one of the best in not just the NFL, but possibly NFL history at running back to do it. He's one of the best. They both went to the same high school in Colorado. They have a rapport there, but he doesn't have like the elite shiftiness and breakaway speed that like those guys that will get the workhorse role. So I think he has a shot to be something at the fantasy level, but like I don't view him as a high-end asset. He will get drafted. I think he's probably a day 3 guy though.
I'm never believing in the hey, I work with an NFLer corollary, because I think it was Tavoris Jones who went to the same high school as Aaron Jones down in El Paso.
Yeah.
And Tavoris Jones has never done anything. So
Tavoris Jones, Gavin Sawchuk, I think that, it's a little bit different. Gavin Sawchuk's, I think, talented. Tavoris Jones, I did not think was talented.
Well, you might end up being right on something, because I made fun of you for your love of Gavin Sawchuk. So every squirrel finds a nut. We'll see in 2024. All right, let's move on here to Tennessee. Josh Heupel is still there. They lose Joe Milton, Jalen Wright, and Jabari Small. That's a lot of production from the backfield out in 2024. They do add transfers. Chris Brazel from Tulane, who I think is a redshirt sophomore going into 2024. A long, lanky wide receiver. I think he's like 6'3", about 190 pounds or something like that. Holden Stays, a tight end from Notre Dame. And they add freshman Mike Matthews, Jake Merklinger. Am I saying that right, Matt? And Brandon Staley.
Yeah, Merklinger.
They are 101st they are 101st in adjusted offensive returning production. So, we're talking about the back half of the NCAA in returning production. But, I mean, this offense is going to revolve around Nico Iamaleava, who had 2 rushing touchdowns in the bowl game against Iowa. I didn't see that coming, Nico Iamaleava being a rushing threat.
My bad. There we go. No, I agree with you. It was exciting to see that, I think, in the bowl game, because we got a little bit of that out of Hendon Hooker 2 years ago, though he is not nearly the athlete that Nico is either. But at least we got to see him running a little bit. I don't feel like we got enough of that out of Joe Milton. My hope is they will continue to use him in that way. Obviously, the fear with that is, though, he is obviously that very slender build. Everybody calls him Slenderman for a reason. If you look at him out on the field, obviously ran a lot in high school, never really got hurt to my knowledge or suffered any major injuries. So you hope that doesn't happen at the college level. I think that's the only fear you have of him running the ball. But if they really use him that way that they did in the bowl game, I mean, we're looking at a guy who has a shot to be a true fantasy stud, not just because of what he can do passing the ball, but obviously running as well.
Let me know in the comments if Matt's audio is going in and out. It could just be my headphones, but that's what I'm looking for, is can this offense return to its 2022 form under Hendon Hooker when they beat Alabama? They were aggressive vertically. It's not like they don't have the weapons. I mean, that offense had Jalen Hyatt and Cedric Tillman. Squirrel White, in my opinion, is just as talented as Jalen Hyatt as far as being a deep threat goes. They got Dante Thornton. I don't know if Brew McCoy is going to be healthy. I think that's probably why they got Chris Brazell there. But while Joe Milton had the strong arm, he's never been like an accurate passer going back to his time at Michigan. Nico Iamaleava, if there's one thing that he's always done well, is throw that deep ball. And that's the type of offense they ran in 2022 with Hendon Hooker. That offense is really fun to watch. I hope we get back to it here this year.
Yeah, I mean, you talked about how fun it was to watch. They passed every year of Josh Heupel, so his time at UCF and Tennessee were over 50%, including in 1 year UCF, 56% of the time. And that's just fun to watch. The worst year for them was 2018, but the second worst year was 2023, where there was only 48% of the time. It was a little bit more than that, about 50% of the time there with, who was I just talking about? Hendon Hooker. But overall, success rate has been in the upper 40s for most of his career in that offense. And then explosiveness has been really, really good. I mean, you talk about 1.6 is the average. There, most seasons is at 1.7, except for, you guessed it, the year you just talked about, that 2023 year. Their pass explosiveness was only at 1.3%. It's not good. It was also the worst year for their wide receivers. You talk about Squirrel White and some of those guys. Those guys are typically in the Josh Heupel offense averaging 21 plus points a game, 12 points a game for wide receiver 1 in 2023. It really feels like Joe Milton was the reason that offense was held back. And I agree with you. I think having Nico there, we're going to see a massive bounce back. And as crazy as it is to say, like, we could be looking at Tennessee as possibly one of those teams as a, what's the word that they're using to make the 12-team playoff? I forgot what the word is, because they're not going to win the SEC.
A playoff team? What are you talking about?
No, they talk about those other teams, I don't remember what they call them nowadays, that make it in if you're not a conference winner. Because supposedly, we haven't really talked about this on the show, the bid for I know we're getting completely off track here, but the bid for the Power Fives to not all get a spot got declined or whatever. So the Pac-12 is getting an automatic bid into the playoff. As of right now,
it doesn't even exist. What are
it does exist. It's Washington State and Oregon State. So there's a shot that we're going to have. I think it had to be a unanimous vote, and the Pac-12 voted against it. So one of those teams will get an automatic bid in. So. Okay,
I'm being told in the chat that my audio is actually going out. So I'll see if I can get that corrected here. Matthew, they lose Jalen Wright and they lose Jabari Small. Dylan Sampson was actually the second leading rusher on the team with 603 yards. We've been very excited about Cam Seldon as a freshman, a wide receiver in high school, kind of like a tweener wide receiver running back. They made him a full-time running back. As far as athleticism goes, there ain't like nobody in the class like comparable. I mean, that dude is just a beast athletically, but I said this after the spring game. He did not look totally comfortable as a running back. And going into the 2024 season, he didn't get as much time as Dylan Sampson. Going into 2024, Dylan Sampson should be the primary back, and Cam Seldon is going to be sprinkled in here, is now the time to sell Cam Seldon, who was probably at least a second-round pick in most freshman drafts last year.
I think so. So behind the scenes, we've been updating our rankings as we've moved all the rookies out and really kind of getting our stuff in. I was doing mine. Cameron Seldon is low for me, a lot lower than I expected, or I guess a lot. I didn't expect some of the other people who have him top 10 in their running back rankings. Granted, we've talked a lot that this is like a weird year, but I think that he is extremely raw coming in. You're betting 100% on him being an athlete. And what I mean by that, too, is you look at this dude's athletic comparison in our athletic comparison tool on campus2canton.com. Latavius Murray. I mean, say what you want about him, maybe not living up to his NFL hype. He's still in the NFL, was a great back for, a decade plus at this point. Matt Forte, Adrian Peterson, Bo Jackson, Herschel Walker, Beanie Wells, David Johnson. I mean, it's a list of who's who and who succeeded in the NFL. But the problem is, I don't think he's anywhere near as talented in the overall running back game as any of those players. Like your best hope is he turns out to be like a Matt Forte because of how great of a receiver he was in the NFL. David Johnson, too, obviously kind of limited because of his injuries. But I think his vision is horrible. I just don't think he knows how to play running back personally. He switched back and forth, not only between wide receiver and running back in high school, he also played defense. With what Tennessee possibly has coming for them in the 2024 season, again, what I think they could be, I think that while he will get the work, and I pulled up their running backs do, I think Austin just mentioned it in the chat, they do split fairly often. You're looking at typically their running backs, it's like almost a 60-40 split. In the previous years, I know Austin mentioned in the bowl game, it was a 2013 split for Dylan Sampson, Cam Seldon. But typically, if you go back and look what they've done, it's been almost a 60-40 split. And their running backs, both of them average fairly well. His running back ones typically average anywhere from 12 to 17 points. His running backs 10 points. I mean, 10 points is maybe a flex starter for you every week. So with his explosiveness and how great of an athlete he is, I do think if you want to hold on to him, you can. But like, if someone really thinks he's a top 10 back, I'd probably try and move him. I don't have him that high. I can pull my rankings up. I think I have him closer to 24 than I do 10. Like, I just think he's got to improve a lot as a running back. And granted, being a great athlete, you can succeed in college doing that. I don't think you succeed in the NFL as much being just a great athlete. Yeah,
the problem is that this running back class is relatively weak. And so if you're going to take a shot on a running back, you might as well hold Cam Seldon as Austin mentioned in the chat here. They split 2013. They split 20 carries, 13 carries in the bowl game. So potential post-spring transfers, Matthew, I think that we have to consider Nathan Leacock, who was a late riser in the recruiting rankings, that he's a potential post-spring transfer. Recorded no stats in it was a year 1-0. They bring in two, highly touted wide receivers in this year's class. He's going to be behind Squirrel White, Dante Thornton, Caleb Webb, and Chris Brazzell, who they brought in. I mean, I don't know why Nathan Leacock would stay around, for his third year to see if he can get on the field. I don't know if he can get in there. If we're talking about potential post-spring transfers, of the fantasy relevant ones, I would circle Nathan Leacock to, be out of here.
Yeah, he would be my vote as well, to probably on his way out the door. He was the guy that we liked because he was going to Tennessee, a decent wide receiver, but I think the wide receiver they brought in Mike Matthews is overall better, can work really good in the middle of the field, good route runner, explosive after the catch. So I think Leacock could probably be on his way out. Just to clarify, as I wanted to pull it up, I have Cameron Seldon as my RB 18, just ahead of one Gavin Sawchuk at 19. So.
Oh, I think I have him way lower than
I don't blame you. The biggest thing is it's just so hard trying to argue putting guys over him because, like I said, of how great of an athlete he is. Like, guys right behind him, two of your boys, actually, so you're probably going to yell at me. Omari and Hampton and DJ Giddens I have right behind him. Then I have a bunch of freshmen, James People, Taylor Tatum, K1 Lacey. So, like, I think it's hard, and Quentin Martin's right in that range as well, but I have him above Seldon. Like, it's just running back is, I think, you could argue top heavy. And when I say top heavy, there's like 4 guys that I really want. And then it's just kind of like how do you think they're going to do college-wise, I think.
All right, let's move on here to Florida. Matthew, do you want to take Florida here to start? Because my audio is messing up. I'm going to try to fix it here live on. Yeah.
So with Florida, there was no massive changes on the coaching staff, at least when it comes to Billy Napier. Obviously, we can talk about what we think might happen with him later. No changes on the offensive coordinator side. They did bring in Ron Roberts as co-defensive coordinator, a fairly experienced defensive coordinator as well. Took Auburn last year to 17th overall in total defense. And when he was with Baylor, they had an incredible year that year, ranking top in a lot of the categories such as run defense, scoring defense, turnovers, turnover margin, defensive touchdowns. So he really did a good job of kind of making that defense run, something that I think could help out Florida a lot. As we saw, Graham Mertz in that offense last year was not as bad as at least some of us thought it was going to be. I was not obviously, Felix will be back here in a minute, talked about Graham Mertz possibly being the next Peyton Manning. We actually saw him kind of not take that massive step forward, but like a good step forward last year with Florida. So possibly having a much better defense to get them the ball more often could make this team and offense more exciting. The key departures, Ricky Pearsall, who is their leading wide receiver, leaves. And then obviously the big one too, Trevor Etienne. Probably their 2 best offensive weapons outside of Graham Mertz, Felix, are gone. Trevor Etienne to Georgia, and then Pearsall, I believe, went to the NFL. So big losses for them on offense. I mean, there's not a lot left in this room. They did get Austin's in the chat. His boy Clay Millen transferring in at quarterback. More probably is just a depth move in case something happens to Mertz, because obviously they bring in highly touted freshman quarterback DJ Lagway. In the freshman class, they also bring in wide receiver Shimere DK, who's getting a lot of love out of Wisconsin. Was that 2 years ago? I think he was having that really big spring, and everybody was hyping him up as like the next big thing. What are your thoughts though on the wide receivers and running backs? Because to me, I thought that was. They have some interesting names at top, specifically Eugene Wilson III, who was really good last year as a freshman for them. But I think the depth in both of those.
There's a name that you haven't said. There's a name that you haven't said.
Go ahead.
Arliss Boardingham. Boardingham, who is my tight end 3 on the seat. This dude, he's a little bit shorter, but he's stocky, in that Delaney Walker type mold. But he's great. Well, he's good after the catch, and we kind of see that these tight ends have a slower trajectory, but he was good last year in his second year. He could have a breakout year, starting here in 2024. I think he's an excellent player. Again, I know I have him in the top 5. He might be my tight end 2, but Arliss Boardingham is the one that I would, want to see connecting with Graham Mertz, who, by the way, I didn't realize completed 72% of his passes. Now, he didn't even have 3,000 yards passing, 20 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, a very Russell Wilson-esque year last year. But no, I am very excited about Arliss Boardingham.
I mean, my thing is with him, and obviously we don't have ways to track how good the tight ends do, unfortunately, because as Corey mentions in the comments, tight ends don't matter. But going in and looking at his offenses over the past few years, whether it was with Louisiana, the Raging Cajuns, or Florida, they just don't pass the ball a ton. Now, granted, he did not have a very good passing quarterback, obviously, at Louis. Is it their ULL, right? I always get that one messed up. It's ULL. It was Lee. I want to say, was it Levi Williams? Am I remembering that correctly? Whoever their quarterback was
Levi Lewis.
Levi Lewis. A rushing threat, couldn't throw for anything. They obviously, that first year when they were going back and forth between, help me out here, Anthony Richardson and who would they not let Anthony Richardson play over in that first year?
The number 6 overall pick, who went to Cincinnati. Oh, come on now. I'm forgetting his.
Yeah,
you remember when PFF mocked him number 6 overall to the Eagles.
Jones, that's right.
Emory Jones.
Because me and Austin he got to kick me in the nuts at the Expo if Emory Jones really went as a top 10 pick. And then that next year, though, when Richardson was the starter, they passed it a little bit more. But last year was by far his heaviest year passing the ball and was still only 45% of the time. And granted, as you mentioned, Graham Mertz, like, say what you want, did get 3,000 passing yards. Like, he actually played fairly good. I think there was a lot of people who thought Florida was going to be like a 2-win team last year. They surprised people because of how well Graham Mertz played. And because of that as well, Ricky Pearsall, I think, skyrocketed in value. He averaged 16 points a game. I mean, that was amazing. Nobody averaged more than 12 points a game the rest of the time Billy Napier's been a head coach. So that's kind of my big fear with this offense is I understand it's a 1-year sample size and Graham Mertz kind of making it better, but like, is it going to be Eugene Wilson? Is it going to be Arliss Boardingham? Like, I think it's probably going to lean toward Eugene Wilson. So not that Arliss Boardingham is a bad player, but I just don't know that he has like any real fantasy value in this offense.
Do you have a strong take on whether you'd rather have Eugene Wilson or Kevin Concepcion out of NC State?
Oh, man. See, this is bad because I keep saying on this show I'm going to watch Kevin Concepcion, and I still have not done that. Right now, I'd probably take Eugene Wilson. I haven't ranked higher. Being at Florida, I think that matters. And if DJ Lagway ends up being half of what we think he could be, like Eugene Wilson could be in for another massive year. And if he gets targeted the way that Ricky Pearsall did last year, I think he's in for a massive season this year. Colin Decker's boy, right? I mean, that's the guy, I can't remember what he said, start him or sit him in Austin, flamed him, and then was like completely wrong on campus life. But yeah, I think right now I'd probably take Eugene Wilson.
I have not watched DJ Lagway in depth. I've seen the highlights and I've heard kind of the description of his traits. Are we talking about like a Jamarcus Russell type quarterback here? Not that's a good comp actually, but I'm not using that as a pejorative. Yeah. I'm saying like somebody who has that type of arm talent.
Yes, there is not a throw on the field I don't think he can't make. He is that talented as a passer. My biggest fear with him and why I think maybe I'm letting like what happened with Jamarcus Russell affect me. I don't remember how good his footwork was in college. I know obviously a lot of the stuff in the NFL was he was just lazy and didn't like watch film and everything. Lagway just seems to me to have horrible footwork, like almost all the time. But like on an athletic scale, he's right up there with like your boy Lenora Sellers. Like that's actually one of his top comps. Like he's a really good rusher, an extremely strong arm. Hang on, I was trying to pull it up so I can see here. And we have him at a ball velocity, approximate ball velocity at 53. It's one of the best in this class. It's high, over 50, I'm told, is very good. Runs 20.9 miles an hour, so almost that 21 threshold. Like he's going to be a really fun quarterback. I just think the mechanics are kind of all over the place. I mean, the throw that went viral last year was like him doing this jump throw that I'm almost positive went like 50 or 60 yards. Like he's just got all the tools, and if he can refine them, I think like he will be the best quarterback in this class. But obviously the big question is going to be is, can Billy Napier really help develop him or get the best out of him? Because we saw not even arguably, so far the most athletic quarterback to ever enter the NFL in Anthony Richardson under Billy Napier, and they couldn't figure out to get almost anything out of that kid. So, like, that's, I think, the big fear in a guy like DJ Lagway coming to this program.
Well, I mean, that's what happens when a coach just brings his system and doesn't tailor it to the talent that exists there with the program. And we knew that was going to be Billy Napier's problem, and it was, which is why he might not be the coach next year. Let me ask you this. Is there an argument? I mean, I think that there is. Would you take DJ Lagway over Dylan Raiola?
I would. I have Lagway as my QB1 because I don't. It's scary to say this because we could have a Malachi Nelson thing all over again, but I don't think there's almost any way he's not the guy for Florida next year, whether Billy Napier is there or not. Lagway is just that highly. Lincoln Riley wanted him. He is I think the quarterback with the best overall intangible and tools in this class. The only argument I think you can make for Dylan Raiola is that he is going to be starting at Nebraska next year. So like his value could increase if he plays well. But then I think the other side of that is you argue if Lagway doesn't play, or if we see him in limited times and say he does something like Aiden Childs did for Oregon State, then his value is going to increase as well. But I think Lagway overall has much better tools, but not nearly as refined as Raiola. Yeah,
I mean, I think, listen, you guys, anytime I highlight or tout a pocket passer always get thrown in my face that, oh, they don't have a high fantasy ceiling. Well, Dylan Raiola is a pocket passer. So
yeah.
I mean, by default, I feel like that means that you have to take DJ Lagway number one.
I
do
mean,
want to just emphasize that we know that Billy Napier uses. What'd you say?
Oh, I'd say I'd take my guy Luke Kromenhoek over Dylan Raiola too, but that's like blasphemous.
Oh, for real?
So, 100%.
Okay. Well, I guess we'll talk about that once we get to the ACC. I do want to emphasize that Billy Napier uses a committee. He has always used a committee. I mean, going back to his time at Louisiana Lafayette, you're talking about Raymond Calais, Elijah Mitchell, Trey Regis, all those guys. I think there was a year where all of those guys had 1,000 yards rushing, or maybe like all of them had more than 700 yards rushing, or something.
I believe 2 of them did, and 1 had 900. I believe is how it was.
And then my boy, I forgot the running back that I liked, who was a freshman there out of Louisville, Mississippi. I forgot his name, but he had like 400 yards rushing the year that those 2 of those guys had 1,000 yards rushing. So I would watch out for that. Montrell Johnson, of course, is back, and then Trayon Webb is returning in his second year. He had 163 yards rushing last year. He was the 3rd leading rusher after Trevor Etienne, who has departed for Georgia. So we always want to see what Billy Napier is going to use in the backfield, even though that might not be guys you can actually start on the college side of your league. So, all right. That takes us to Ole Miss. Do you want to take us through Ole Miss too, Matthew?
Yeah, Ole Miss, no real changes on the offensive or defensive coordinator. Obviously, Lane Kiffin used Alabama as a chance to get himself a better contract, but did not end up going to Alabama. Zachary Franklin, Spencer Sanders out through the NFL draft, transferred out. A bunch of players. Now, I'm going to list these guys. After the top 2, none of them really mattered for fantasy, but I think to just kind of emphasize how wide open this wide receiver room could be, Quinshon Judkins out, Michael Trigg out. Even though Michael Trigg never really, I think, realized the value or the potential we had hoped he would in that offense, he's still a big name going to Baylor. Judkins obviously on his way to Ohio State. Then running back Jam Griffin out, and wide receivers Larry Simmons, Jeremiah Griffin, Braylon Brown, and J.J. Henry all transferred out. In Logan, this just offense, by the way, because Lane Kiffin loaded up on defense in the transfer portal. On the offensive side of things, brings in Logan Diggs at running back, Devin Price at wide receiver, Antoine Wells at wide receiver, Daquan Wright at tight end. So he did a really good job in hitting the transfer portal and kind of loading up on the running back and wide receiver positions that transferred out. And then obviously we, as being a fantasy show, don't talk a lot about defense, but absolutely killed it on the defensive side of things. They ended up with the number 1 transfer portal class in 2024, and I believe a top 20 recruiting class as well. So, I mean, Lane killed it in the offseason this year and trying to make Ole Miss a team that could compete for a playoff spot.
Yeah, 2 of those names on the defense, Prince Amuma. See, I practiced this when I talked about Ole Miss when we were doing all those transfer portal videos. Yeah. Prince Amamielen from Florida to Ole Miss, and then Walter Nolan. Yeah. Walter Nolan from Texas A&M, who was the number 1 player in his class. So they did load up with the number 1 transfer portal. What are your expectations for Jaxson Dart? I mean, you've kind of been high. Weren't you the one that said Jaxson Dart was better than Caleb? Yes, you were.
Was going to be.
You said Jaxson Dart was better than Caleb Williams. I mean, he had an excellent season last year, and he's a consensus top 10 quarterback. So, what are your expectations for him in 2024?
He did, and there's still a chance for him to have an amazing 2024 season and prove that he is better than Caleb Williams. But that was, I think, the very first argument me and Chris Moxley ever got into. And I thought about it, by the way, is the at-large bids. Those are the teams that make it in and that are not conference winners. So that's the word I was looking for. I think he has a chance to be really – we saw him take a small step forward in 2022 toward the end of the year. And it was a very small step. I think it was like the last 3 games, if I'm remembering correctly, played really well. And last year, I thought he played a lot better than he gets credit for. He was just very consistent. Was he flashy the way Caleb Williams is? No. but he is a gunslinger who can, I think, make every throw on the field. I thought his mechanics and footwork improved a little bit last year. He cut down a little bit more on some of those turnovers, and I think he has a chance to do it again this year. I mean, Ole Miss brings back a ton of talent, not just, defensively, they're bringing a lot of that into the transfer portal, but they're bringing a lot of the main players back on the offensive line back into this team. Like, I think Ole Miss is a very scary team next year, and I think Jaxson Dart could absolutely thrive and succeed in this offense, especially with the additions in the wide receiver room. Running back, I'm a little worried about because I'm not really high on Logan Diggs, and I don't know why we didn't see anything of Kedrick Riscano last year, but they still have Ulysses Bentley, who was very good for them as the running back 2 behind Judkins last year.
So I can't believe Ulysses Bentley is still in college. I mean, I feel like we were talking about him back in 2000 when we first started this show at SMU.
Yeah. I mean, hey, COVID does wonders for these kids and being able to kind of hang on as long as they want to. So I think he has a chance to be really good. I don't know that I would put him. So their number 39 overall. I was trying to bring up Nick's again. The only place you can find returning production, the returning production database is with the C2C Winning Edge. Go check it out. I promise you it is worth every single penny that you will spend on it. I don't know that I would put him right now in the category of possibly getting first-round draft capital. Even with as poor as I think this QB class could end up being at the end of the day, there's a lot of names, but not a lot of proven talent at the top of the quarterback rankings right now, at least for who could come out in 2024. I don't know that I'd put him there as possibly being a day one guy, but I would say with what I saw at the end of 2022 and the entire 2023 season, unless he falls flat on his face this year, I think he's secured at least day 2 draft capital, which could be an NFL starter. And that's, something that I would be excited about because I think he's a very talented player.
I do want to note that Deion Smith is probably not rostered in most campus to Canton leagues. He was at LSU his freshman season. I don't know what happened, if it was grades or whatnot. Was in JUCO last year and now is with Ole Miss. He did have 186 yards receiving, so he broke year 1-0 thresholds. And he had one game with 5 receptions for 135 yards against Central Michigan and 2 touchdowns. I mean, that was really the game that put him over. But an explosive player. I know Mike Valerie likes him. By the way, listen to Back to Debbie. They talked a little bit today about DJ Lagway. So, but Deion Smith, one of those names that, you got to pay attention to the non-freshmen that you should take in your freshman and supplemental drafts. He would be a name that I would, put a star next to so I don't forget. So, all right. What else should be said? This Ole Miss team may be like this Kansas City Chiefs team where, Kansas City has historically relied on its offense, but maybe in 2024, Ole Miss relies on its defense the way Kansas City relied on its defense here in the 2023-2024 season.
Yeah, it's really hard for me to find a player that I absolutely love on this offense from a CFF point of view. And now I don't work with the CFF team, so maybe Jared and Nate, Chris K, Ethan will tell me I'm wrong on that. But like looking at this, like maybe it's Logan Diggs coming in, that power running back. Maybe it is Kedrick Riscano if he's able to take over. But like looking at the wide receiver core, is it Jordan Watkins, Trey Harris, who are both returning to the offense? Like, did one of them take the step forward to be the wide receiver 1? Aiden Williams, who was a true freshman last year. Like, I don't love Antoine Wells transferring in, who I'm almost positive had a pretty good year last year. Like,
he was hurt much of the year last year. He had a great season the year before.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. Year before. Like, it's a very interesting wide receiver room, but like, I don't know who you'd bet on as being the top guy. And so, like, I just don't like anybody on this team. It makes me. I have no problem rostering, and I think you will be able to start Jaxson Dart at times because he's also not afraid to run the ball, so you'll get that rushing production out of him. He takes some big hits. Also, I think a problem he kind of needs a knockout before he gets to the NFL. But, I mean, even last year I was trying to pull it up. I mean, their wide receiver 1 averaged 15 points a game, which is right at the threshold. Wide receiver 2, 11 points a game. So, like, it wasn't like a massive separate. It wasn't like what we had those previous years at Ole Miss where you're getting almost 20 and then 25 points a game the years prior to that, 21 and 2020 under Lane Kiffin. I just don't think there's that guy in this offense. So, like, for me, I think it's Jaxson Dart. And then, like, maybe the cheapest guy you can draft out of the wide receiver room and hope that he hits. Like, I don't know that I like anybody in that wide receiver room.
The SEC is going to be fun next year, not just because Texas and Oklahoma are there, but because we're seeing a changing of the guard from Alabama. So is there another team that's going to kind of emerge as the dominant, other than Georgia? Other than Georgia, is there a team that's going to emerge as a competitor of Georgia's? And, Ole Miss might be right there at the end. So.
Well, no, it's not. It's Texas. It's Texas. And then I think it's pretty easily, in my opinion, Georgia as the one. Then there's a teardrop, and then it's Texas, and then I think it's honestly another teardrop, and then you've got, I think, Ole Miss, Alabama are the next two, and then everybody else comes after. Like, I think those are the top four. I think all four could make the playoffs. I think Georgia or Texas wins the SEC. I mean, Texas has the chance to control. I know you guys talked a lot about them. They play, I believe, no, I don't think they play Alabama. I know they play Georgia in week 3. Georgia comes to Texas, so that's going to be a great game because it is not easy to win at the 40 acres. So that'll be a fun game. Texas has a chance to control what happens throughout the SEC. I think those are the top two teams. Ole Miss should be considered, I think, right below them on the same tier as Alabama, though.
I guess we're going to see Quinn Ewers versus Carson Beck in that matchup. That's going to be fun.
Can't wait for Quinn Ewers to outduel Carson Beck. Oh, it's going to be glorious. Yeah, absolutely glorious.
I know you hope so. I think that's it. Is there anything else that we need to cover for these four teams?
We've mentioned the freshmen for each team, so I'll just mention the I guess the guy to talk about on Ole Miss is Cutler Boley. You don't have to worry about it. I don't think he's an extreme.
What position?
Quarterback. Position? Sorry. Wait, actually, I think he's going to Kentucky. So never mind. I don't know why I brought him up. He's going to Kentucky. I did not. I meant to say that he's going to Kentucky, which we'll talk about them next week, right? Or did we already talk about Kentucky?
I can't remember. I think we already talked about Kentucky, but we will be finishing the last 4 teams in the SEC next week. So stick around for that. Of course, as always, like the video, subscribe to the channel. And I don't know if my audio is messing up tonight or what. I mean, I couldn't hear in my headphones and was trying to fix it on the fly. So if my audio was messed up, I apologize for that. All right. That's going to be it for us tonight. Apologies to Kirk Herbstreit. We ran out of time. We'll get them rescheduled soon for Matt Bruening. I'm Felix Sharpe. Good night and good luck.